This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. The Middle Ground Mike is fighting for truth and unity. Subscribe now or support us today. Links are in the notes. Stand with us. Welcome to the Middle Ground Mike, local edition. I'm Joe, and today we're going to be covering a true crime story that has left Michigan, especially rural Michigan, and in northern Michigan, shaken to its core. If you're watching on Rumble, hit that follow button. Help us grow. If you're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, subscribe, follow us, give us some engagement, give us some feedback. Let's keep helping us dominate. And thank you for helping us hit 500,000 podcast downloads and over 1 million total views and impressions in under a year. Crazy, unprecedented growth for a show like this. I thank you. Let's dig in. You know, the last 24 hours, right? In 24 hours before she vanished, her life seemed ordinary. Or at least that's what the people around her assumed. She was pregnant, far enough along that preparation should have been happening, doctor's visits, nursery plans, support, but none of that was happening. In fact, she had multiple prenatal appointments that were missed. A detailed prosecutor have later called a massive red flag. Her phone activity slowed dramatically in the final days. Call logs showed she tried calling a friend twice, both times late at night. Neither call connected. Investigators believe she may have been trying to escape her home environment, but they don't know. Her internet history, it's now coming out, can stress hurt pregnancy. Shelters near me in Michigan. Signs of toxic family behavior. Then silence. No more searches. No more messages. The next morning, she was gone. Family members provided differing accounts. She left early. She said she needed air. She went for a walk. She was upset. Police quickly have started to realize that none of these stories align with the phone data or with the timestamps on home security cameras neighbors provided. Whatever happened, it didn't happen the way some people and her family are saying that it did. But let's talk a little bit about who she was. She wasn't anonymous. She had dreams. She had fears. She had a complicated relationship with her mother. A relationship marked by control, volatility, and emotional manipulation. She had told friends that she felt trapped. She told another she feared what would happen once the baby came. One friend has supposedly said, "I don't think my mom wants this baby here." That line hits harder once you know the supposed truth. She grew up in a home that seemed to be loving at times and frightening at others. Her mother had a history of erratic behavior. A lot of us have experienced that with parents. The stepfather had multiple domestic violence complaints, none which seemed to have led to charges. But neighbors said they heard a lot of fights, crazy fights going on, lots of arguing. That would make you just feel raw, screaming. Police arriving at odd hours. That wasn't a stable environment for a pregnant young woman. But like many communities, families, rural Michigan families, it was normal enough, apparently, where people didn't notice it enough that they felt the need to truly intervene. Nobody felt that. How did we miss this? But within 48 hours, local deputies realized the situation was not adding up. Her phone never pinged outside of a small radius. There were no footprints leading away from the property. Only tire tracks that didn't match her vehicle. Her clothes were still in the house. Her medications were untouched. Police began interviewing family members separately. Immediately, stories conflicted. Timelines drifted. Small details didn't match. Things like when she was last seen. What was she seen wearing? Where she planned to go? Who she spoke with? Experienced investigators know, in a missing person case, a changing story is almost a warning sign. Almost always a warning sign. And that's just from my basic research here, right? Some of you that have a little bit more of a passion for this type of thing, you probably know that better than I do. Volunteers searched through swampy forest areas. The dogs picked up and lost scents repeatedly in the same 3-mile area. One volunteer later said, "It felt like we were circling the same nightmare." And then a chilling detail seemed to emerge. A neighbor's home camera captured the stepfather's vehicle leaving It captured it, right? Like, how are you going to lie when there's a security camera? But it captured it leaving home around 3 a.m. that day and returning roughly 90 minutes later. He originally told police he never left the house that night. That lie shifted the investigation from concern to suspicion. If you like this, please like, follow, comment, subscribe. Let's get into the other part of this. The suspicion part is just, it's concerning, right? The weeks later that they found it, the body was deliberately placed few people would walk. Seasoned officers, men and women who have seen overdoses, suicides, murders, accidents, describe this as something out of a nightmare. The condition of her body indicated extreme violence, and this is what we are hearing. Again, we don't all know the facts, but the evidence suggested that the unborn child was possibly forcibly removed. That's cruelty layered on cruelty. And it's hard for me to stomach. I'm a father of 2. But multiple agencies have now rushed in. State police, specialized forensic units, and behavioral analysts. Because this wasn't a moment of just rage. This wasn't just impulsive. This was controlled, this was planned, and this seems to be intentional by whoever did it. And the emotional shockwave that is hitting the people finding out about this is like a punch to the chest and to the gut at the same time, as hard as it can be. But when the authorities announced the arrests, people froze because they weren't strangers. They were predators hiding in the woods. They weren't, I should say. They were her mother and the husband. People struggled to process it. How could a mother of all people commit such a horrific act? This is where true crime intersects with psychological collapse. Control, delusion, manipulation, paranoia, family trauma, cycles of violence that go back generations. I dealt with a father who was extremely paranoid. He's seen crazy things all the time. Neighbors described the home as chaotic, arguments, instability, the years of tension. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Small communities and communities that seem to be tight-knit, sometimes they can normalize dysfunction unintentionally. You see a little chaos and say, that's the way that family is. But sometimes it's not just how that family is. It's a warning sign. We can focus on the suspects. We can talk about the brutality. But if we stop there, we learn nothing. Where did the system fail? Where did our society fail her? Because violence doesn't appear out of thin air. Our communities in Michigan, especially the rural ones, they're facing huge challenges to be able to tackle things like this. Underfunded social services, short-staffed police departments, long distances between calls. So it takes crazy amounts of time sometimes to address the problem. Overloaded caseworkers handling dozens and dozens of files. Mental health issues, good Lord. No domestic violence shelters for miles. Women and people in danger, especially in a lot of rural Michigan, often have nowhere to go. It's not the community's fault. It's just something that it's the way that it's been, but we got to get better. We got to try to fix it. Because they have no transportation, and some of these people have no privacy, no outside support, no access to the interventions. The result, the warning signs pile up quietly until a tragedy erupts crazy. This case is not just about the mother and the husband. It's about a system stretched beyond its breaking. The arrests, after them, the community's grieving. People brought candles, they brought flowers, they held each other in silence. They looked at the pictures. They talked maybe about their own experiences and certain things like this, maybe memories. That's what happens when you do that. You try to relate to it, even if you don't know the person. You're trying to think, man, you're trying to reason it. You're trying to comprehend it. You're trying to process it. And that's hard to do. And some people are expressing guilt. Could we have done something? Did we ignore the signs? How did this system miss this? Why did no one intervene earlier? The tragedy is forcing Michigan to confront difficult questions about it. Family violence, the rural isolation, the generational trauma, again, with mental health, women's safety, especially pregnant women, failing institutions, and not even because it's necessarily even the institution's fault. It's because it's set up sometimes in a way that it can't succeed in an area where everything's so spaced out. And while none of this is going to bring her back, maybe we can prevent a future tragedy. Maybe we can save one life down the road. I'm really just trying, you don't unsee something like that. A reporter took leave after working this scene. The brutality to deep psychological instability, not a sudden snap. Apparently the mother has shown signs of delusional thinking, obsessive control, an intense need for power over her daughter, and according to some people, hostility over the pregnancy. It's... How can you be hostile at your own daughter for this? That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't add up. None of this adds up. One friend told the investigators that her mother, said that Courtney Bartholomew and Brad Bartholomew, her stepfather, that they were crazy. Her name is Rebecca Park. She was age 22. The stepfather, had a documented pattern of coercion, intimidation, I said earlier, the domestic violent issues, the motives behind this that they're talking about are jealousy, control, resentment, and deep psychological instability. That part seems to be pretty obvious. The mother has apparently, told conflicting stories. Courtney Bartholomew, the mother, let's see, what were some of the things that she was saying? That they got into a crazy heated argument and that she left. She ran away after the argument, said she was never possibly even coming back. Then it changed as she was taken. Your neighbors have security cameras. What are you thinking? They're saying Courtney left. Why would Courtney just up and leave if she hadn't done that before? She was looking at it, right? But then there was no sign of her. But police found no evidence supporting any of those claims that any of this happened to Courtney. The couple's Google searches, the mother and the father, the crazy things about Courtney and Brad that they were searching, right? And this is going to be very, 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 whoa. Courtney and Brad. Okay, the mother and the stepfather. Their searches included, how long does DNA last in the snow? Hello. Signs of miscarriage and late pregnancy. How to preserve a fetus.
The everyday work of budgets.
What? How to hide a body in the winter. Who thinks of these things? Who thinks that this is honestly going to work out that way? The searches didn't lie. I mean, when you look at the evidence, this is all adding up. This painted a picture darker than any motive that the common man and even some of the prosecutors even initially considered. But let's talk about what nobody wants to admit. This murder was not a boom lightning strike on Rebecca. It was the final stage of a system-wide collapse that we have to figure out how to do a better job in filling these gaps. There were warning signs of things that were happening to Rebecca by her mother and her stepfather. There were welfare checks on Rebecca. There were neighbor complaints about her mother and stepfather, I should say, going after her, seemingly with very violent tones. There were medical red flags. The full details on that, I have not seen yet. But there were patterns of emotional and physical abuse. Like we said earlier, there's been tons of calls to the house, tons of complaints about the psychological and physical abuse that's going on there. The stepdad had a pattern history of it. Multiple times that he's been accused of hitting and beating, leaving marks. But in rural Michigan, where you don't have access to a lot of things, these warning signs can get lost. The police departments can be understaffed. The social workers carry impossible caseloads. There's no nearby shelters that are easy access. Mental health providers are booked out months. Families hide dysfunction sometimes behind closed doors because they don't want to be embarrassed. Because everything does get noticed a lot quicker in rural Michigan when it comes to family. Transportation barriers. They can prevent the victims from leaving. This exposes something Michigan needs to confront. And maybe not just Michigan, maybe America. When a vulnerable woman or a vulnerable person is trapped in a dangerous home, not just in a rural community, any community, sometimes they have nowhere to go in their minds, even if there is a place. That's not politics. That's the truth. And we need to find a middle area on how we can make this happen. The right has good assets. The left has good assets. We need to put this together and put aside partisan politics to address these issues, especially for rural Michigan. This community's in shock. It's a reckoning. After these arrests, the community has underwent a big sense of collective grief. People left flowers, notes, baby items. That's a sign of real trauma for some of these people. It's symbols of the life that should have been. Teachers reported students asking heartbreaking questions like, these are kids, they don't know how to process these things. Neighbors who once dismissed the red flags, some of them have said they're feeling crazy guilt. People are going to be dealing with this for a long time. A young woman and an innocent infant are gone. Clergy said attendance spiked because people needed answers. Church is up in general because people are lost. People are going back to God to find answers. But we don't just mourn the tragedies. Michigan is going to seek to learn lessons from them. We're going to show the world how we can make sure and do our best to not let things like this happen to especially vulnerable pregnant women and people in general. This lesson here is painful. And it's painful especially if you're a parent, and even more so if you're a mother. A community is only as safe as the systems protecting its most vulnerable. And that includes not just institutions, that includes our neighbors. This story is horrifying. It should be. But the most disturbing part isn't the crime itself. It's how preventable it may have been. We ignore quiet suffering. We ignore dysfunction sometimes, the underestimated dangers. If Michigan wants to prevent tragedies like this from happening again, we must stop assuming that it couldn't happen here. Because it did. And unless we change something as a community and as a system, things like this could happen and we may never know the truth. I hope everybody says a prayer for Rebecca. I know a lot of people make fun of thoughts and prayers. That seems to be a running joke among people. But this is serious, folks. This had nothing to do that we know of with gun violence, that we know of. I don't know. This has got to go beyond any partisan whips and gotchas. No, this has to be real leadership. We have to push this further than we could have ever imagined. We cannot let Rebecca's tragedy, what happened to her, go in vain. I really thank you for staying with me through this incredibly heavy episode. It's probably one of the first ones I've done of something of this nature. And I guess what really stuck out for me is I'm a father. I have a wife. We have 2 kids. If something like that had happened to my wife, I don't know how I would have reacted. That's just, in the families that have been impacted by this, my heart goes out to you. This is just, it's tragic, But if you believe stories like this need to be told honestly, without the spin, without the agenda, follow us on Rumble, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, Apple, whatever podcast platform you use. Now I want to hear from you. Where do you feel that things failed her? What do you think here in Michigan we could change to protect families and women, pregnant women especially? Because you know what? Your voice does matter here. Your voice matters, Michigan. The votes matter. We are a purple statewide because we all recognize that there's certain things we have to accomplish together. This is the middle ground, Mike, where truth lives between the extremes. Stay safe, stay aware, and as always, keep finding the middle. and we'll see you next week.